Really big non-conference game coming up for the Blue Devils on Friday at Arizona. A big question, how much of a factor will the Duke bench be in this one? We've seen continued improvement in some of the marquee games so far this season, but against the Wildcats, not a whole lot of action for the bench. Does that change at all against Arizona? That and more here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. It's so great to have you here with us on Wednesday, November 20th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. Love talking Duke basketball with you each and every day here on the program. We've got a couple of games left in the Duke football season that we'll be sure to touch on here today with our good pal, Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated, who's going to join us here on today's show. This Duke basketball team getting set for a game on Friday night against Arizona. Going to be a really big-time test for Duke basketball to see whether or not they can respond to their tough loss last week against Kentucky. Bounce back win for the Blue Devils over the weekend against Wofford, but with all due respect to the Terriers, they're nothing quite like these Wildcats that Duke is going to see on the weekend. So many people talking about the depth of this Duke basketball team, rotation size, and so much more. And I think that creates a really interesting conversation ahead of Friday night's game against Arizona. How much of the bench will we see for the Duke basketball team? I think it's got an opportunity to grow a little bit as Duke's got back-to-back tough games. Remember, they're going out to Arizona on Friday, but turn it around pretty quickly. And on Tuesday, they're in Las Vegas for a showdown against the number one team in the land in the Kansas Jayhawks. So all of that and more on today's episode. And we welcome in Conor O'Neill from Devils Illustrated to join us here, duke.rivals.com. for all of his work. Conor, we take a look at this basketball game for Duke coming up against the Wildcats, and the stars you would figure for Duke will show up for this one. I'm curious what it looks like beyond the likes of Cooper Flagg.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. We need to see some bench production. Even beyond that, like the scar tissue is there from the Kentucky game of, I think it was the last 10 and a half minutes. Cooper Flagg was the only Blue Devil that made a shot from the field. And the only points that Duke got in that last 10 and a half minutes were a couple Tyrese Proctor free throws. So I think it was kind of by design by John to go into a game and put the ball in Cooper's hand and see what he can give you. I think that was also a product of nobody else was stepping up to make plays and stepping up to make shots. It's still a make or miss game, and nobody else was making down the stretch, and that's got to change, obviously, if this team is going to go where it wants to go.
Yeah, I certainly do want to get to Big Pat's debut in just a moment, but while we're talking about the bench and talking about, hey, somebody's got to make shots, somebody's got to be able to step in when the ball is not falling. We saw a pretty good case of that on Saturday as Isaiah Evans scores 14 points in just 12 minutes of action on 4 3-pointers. Darren Harris has had some good shot-making abilities over the last few games, and just excited to see what this team is going to be able to do. And if the likes of Isaiah Evans and Darren Harris could get that opportunity, because it is their shooting ability that would be able to make that type of an impact.
Yeah, to me, Isaiah Evans is we're gonna find out over the next few weeks, month and a half. I mean, the timeline is kind of to be determined based on both how comfortable John Shire and the coaching staff are in him and what he does. And right now, it feels like he's in the same mold of Jaden Schutt 2 years ago and TJ Power last year, where you know what he's going to give you offensively. Like, you know that Isaiah Evans is a scorer. He is wired to score.
Yeah.
That's why he was a 5-star. That's why he was having 60-point games for North Mech. He's built that way. what we know about John Shire in his young coaching tenure is he's not going to play you if he doesn't trust you on the defensive end. And if you're a liability, and if you're a guy that the other team is seeing green when they see you matched up against them, you really don't have much of a role for Duke. So if Isaiah can lock up on the defensive end, if he can be passable, if he can grade out well on that end of the court, he's going to be a viable option off the bench. It's just a matter of, the other part of it is he plays a pretty crowded position when you think about his role on the court as off-ball guard or wing. Cooper Flagg played some wing last game. You're not giving Isaiah Evans 20 minutes at risk of Con Knipple only playing 20 minutes. Yeah. So it's a complicated situation. It's a good problem to have. But I am curious what it looks like on the defensive. It's not like I don't pay attention to what Isaiah Evans does offensively. I just pay so much more attention to what he does defensively, because that's going to dictate whether he gets on the court or not in the bigger games.
Yeah, it's certainly easy to do the Monday morning quarterback discussion after the fact, right? These armchair experts that we may or may not be with this game in particular. If Duke in that Kentucky game doesn't shoot 4 of 22 from three-point land, there's really not as big of a need for other guys to be stepping up. And so, yes, it is going to be an added benefit if you get some offensive contributions from the likes of Isaiah Evans and Darren Harris. But also, let's go back, Conor, to, hey, if, Caleb Foster knocks down a couple of shots for Duke, if Tyrese Proctor continues to make them, if Con Knipple doesn't go 1 of 8 from three-point range in these big-time games, I don't know that the chatter for bench production would be as loud.
Yeah, I mean, the other part, I think Jordan on his YouTube channel highlighted this. It's not like Duke was forcing the issue. They were getting the shots that they wanted to get. They just didn't make them. And the one possession that stands out in my mind was Caleb Foster taking 2 wide open threes. He took one and missed it, and I can't remember if he got the offensive rebound or somebody else got it and gave it right back to him in the same spot. But how many times in basketball do you see a talented shooter get a second shot on the same possession from the same spot and make it? It's at that point, it's just like a shooting drill, and shooting drills, college basketball players are usually
taking
above
all the
50%.
time.
Yeah. So, it was just a fluky thing. It was. I don't think it's anything to be overly concerned about. I do think that, you're in this weird in between where, yes, you want to see them win at Arizona. You also want to not put too much importance on that type of game. I don't really know where to stand. Like, nobody's playing a must-win game in mid-November or late November for that matter. But you do want to see some things from Duke. Like, you want to see guys like Tyrese Proctor and Caleb Foster be the veteran and leaders that they are, and make shots down the stretch. That's what they need to do. They don't need to make all of them. Obviously, Cooper's going to have the ball in his hands and be asked to make a lot of them, but he can't do it all.
Without a doubt, he can't. He'll try his best to, the ultimate competitor, but it is nice to get the contributions from other players on the team. So offensively, if Duke is making shots, not as big of a need for the bench to go deeper if the star players and starters are able to knock down those shots. In the front court, however, I think it's an absolute added bonus when you've got players who can make contributions coming off the bench. We saw one particular debut this past weekend that could pay dividends for the Duke team and more. Let's a teaser there. We'll come back and we'll continue that conversation with our good pal Conor O'Neill in just a moment here on Locked On Blue Devils. Let me tell you about our friends over at Mint Mobile. That's right. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It's got to be easy for me to do this. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Well, turns out that's exactly right. It's super easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the entire process was the time that I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. It's pretty awesome. To get the new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3 plan only. Speeds slower than 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions will apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Mint Mobile is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. So said it a moment ago, we saw great offensive production from Isaiah Evans off the bench. He scores 14 points in 12 minutes. The definition of a microwave out there on the floor when you can get that hot that quickly. Beyond the outside shooting, when you look at the front court, however, Duke also got to see the much-anticipated debut of freshman and Patrick Ngongba II. How about 6'11", 250 pounds out there debuting for Duke for the first time? A freshman in the front court set to make an impact. What did you see out of his game, Conor, and what really do you think this means for Duke moving forward?
Yeah, that was honestly the most intriguing part of Saturday to me. I just wrote a story on Devils Illustrated yesterday about kind of the possibilities it opens up with Pat Ngongba being an option. John Shire was very blunt and clear in saying that he's not going to play a ton of minutes this year. He's going to be on a restriction all year because of the foot injury. You know, you're playing a little bit of a long game where you think you'll have Maliq Brown on the roster next year for his senior year. Khaman Maluach is not going to be at Duke next year. He's going to be in the NBA. I don't think I'm breaking any news with that one. So you're in a good place if the top 2 centers are anticipated back, and the more prepared you can get Pat Ngongba for next season when he's got to play with the Boozers and Shelton Henderson and Nick Kamenia and whoever else is back. We can go down that rabbit hole, but that's probably for another time. The better prepared you can get him now, the better off you'll be next season. He might be able to help Duke this year. He can provide some depth. The thing that I was most impressed with was kind of his instincts in the getting the tip outs.
Right.
That was kind of we haven't seen much. He barely played his senior year at PVI. We just haven't seen much from Pat Ngongba on the basketball court. So I went up to him in the locker room and I was just like, is tap outs is that a big part of your game? Like, is that what you do? And he was nervous, understandably. I don't really know if he answered that or not. But where the intrigue continues is with what Duke did when he was in the game. Because they put him out there and kept Maliq Brown on the court at the 4. He's been playing the 5 and just kind of interchanging with Khaman. I think they were in there a couple possessions together, maybe in the second game of the year. But really, they've just been changing off. Now you introduce the possibility that you can put Maliq Brown at the 4, bump Cooper Flagg to the 3, which is where he'll be playing next year and where he's most comfortable. And that means you go 6'9", 6'9", 6'11", and you have a 3-man front court. Not many teams in college basketball have a wing that can match up with Cooper. So that's where, like, even if you can just get 5 to 10 possessions a game with that front court out there, or maybe put in Knipple instead of Flag if Flag is getting a breather at that point in the game. But just that little bit, it intrigues me. Like, it's something we haven't seen before. It's something that honestly, like, I wasn't sure we'd see this year. Like, I didn't know if Pat Ngongba would just be limited to, blowout minutes or just spot minutes when both of the other centers are in foul trouble.
Yeah.
But now it opens up. I'm not talking about this like it's Pandora's box, but there's just that little bit of intrigue with what Duke can do with the lineups when they have a healthy Pat Ngongba.
For sure. I think the question in that matter would be, okay, what does it look like on the offensive end of the floor when you've got Pat and Maliq and Cooper Flag down there in particular, but what they're able to do rebounding the basketball defensively. And if what we've seen so far in the wins this season for Duke, when they are truly taking shots from the outside and the overwhelming majority of their attempts are from the outside, then maybe it's not a big factor at all when you look at the offensive end of the floor, because Maliq Brown and Pat out there just want to rebound. They just want to create more looks and more opportunities for you. And if there is an easy putback right there in front of them, that is something that I think could work and would be exciting.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. And you can't really play 5 out when you put Ngongba and Maliq Brown on the court together. I think you're asking Maliq to kind of step out of his comfort zone when he's playing the 4 and having to play on the outside. It's just a different look. And I think they do want Maliq to look to score more. Again, I've got a flashback of him getting an offensive rebound against Kentucky, and all he's got to do is go up, and he's got a layup from the right side, and instead he kicks it out for a 3. They want him to look to score more, and maybe that's a way that you do it is put him out there at the 4 and put him out there with a big that's not looking to score, and say, hey, look, you're going to have some options here. You're going to be able to space the floor, and that's where more of the intrigue comes with this lineup.
Offensively, on the interior, speaking to the front court, Cooper Flag gets tons of minutes there in those spots, and we don't need to evaluate what he's been able to do. He's just remarkable. But how about Khaman? Even in the game against Wofford, back in double figures, he only plays 12, 13 minutes. I mean, man, Duke is really figuring out, if we just kind of drive to the rim and throw it up at him, it's kind of hard to stop.
He's quietly had double figure scoring in 3 straight games. He had the debut where he only had 6 points, and it's been in double figures. It's not been, I don't know if he's ever going to have a game this year over 20.
Right.
But as long as he's in that 10 to 14 point range, I think he's giving you exactly what you want from him. It was a little fluky that he only had 1 rebound against Wofford. I figure that has more to do with Wofford missing 28 3-pointers, and it's hard for
long rebounds. Yeah,
it's hard for a 7-2 guy to track those long rebounds down. And I think that's why I think all 11 guys who played in the first half had at least 1 rebound. The ball just sprays when you shoot threes the way they did. But yeah, man, I noted, I can't remember if it was the Arizona State exhibition or it was the opener, but it was kind of Tyrese Proctor throwing a lob to Khaman Maluach is, without being too direct and without throwing too much shade, it's kind of yeah, Tyrese, that's what it was like to throw lobs. Don't you remember that from your freshman season? Right. It wasn't an option with last year's personnel, and it is this year. Khaman's more coordinated than I think he's going to get credit for. I think that's going to kind of be people stereotyping a big man from Africa who hasn't been playing basketball for a long time. I think he's on year 4 or 5 playing the game, but he's got hands. He possesses the ball. You don't worry about him fumbling it when you throw it to him up high. So it's going to be there. He's 7'2" and can jump. He stands on his tippy toes and he's touching the rim. It's a world in an air that you and I are probably unfamiliar with.
And never will be, unfortunately. Never quite will be able to know what he's experiencing and that sort of thing. So with all due respect, again, to the Wofford Terriers, when you look at Arizona coming up on Friday, they've got 3 players listed above 7 feet tall, 6'10", a couple of 6'8" guys. I mean, a much larger team once again, which could be big for someone like Maluach to make a big defensive impact, to get a lot of minutes out there on the offensive end of the floor as well. I'm excited to see how that plays out when Duke goes up against a much larger team once again.
Yeah, I've got good news for you. Omar Ballo is not there anymore. He's at Indiana. But honestly, I was really impressed with, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation here, but Montevis Krivas, I think it is.
Yes, go for it. All the confidence there, yes.
He was decent last year against Duke. I mean, he only had 6 points, and he was 2 for 6 from the field, but that was his second college game ever. Right. I think the battle between him and Khaman is going to be, to kind of tip my hand on the preview. I think that's probably going to be the matchup to watch in the preview that I write, just because 2 big guys, raw skills, but extremely skilled. And that's going to be a bit of a war/chess match down there low.
We got to be ready to stay up late for this one. 10:30 p.m. Eastern time on Friday night, ahead of the final football game at home for Duke coming up on Saturday. So going to be a fun one for Duke basketball when they get set to take on Arizona. I do want to talk about that football game, as Duke will have senior day coming up this weekend, and we'll have that conversation after one more timeout here on today's show. All right, Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by Skylight Frames, one of our new sponsors here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Do you want to celebrate with or stay connected to your people that are far away? Are you missing someone this holiday season and want them to be a part of your festivities from afar? You wish they could be close to you? Well, we've got the perfect gift for you. Skylight Frame is the touchscreen digital photo frame your whole family will love. You can upload thousands of photos with your phone and watch them appear in just seconds. Setup takes less than 60 seconds. You can invite friends and family to share photos via the free Skylight mobile app. You can add new photos straight from your phone from anywhere. It takes a tap on your phone to send new photos to a frame across the country. The fastest and easiest way to keep loved ones in the loop. They'll feel so much more connected to you this holiday season. And now, as a special limited time offer to our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/college. That's skylightframe.com/college, skylightframe.com/college. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/college, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Want to also tell you about our friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get ready to tackle all of the NFL action this weekend. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. Fun Thursday night game this week in the AFC North with the Steelers taking on the Browns. You can see all the lines and more over at FanDuel. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Okay, just one more time this year will Duke football play inside Wallace Wade Stadium. It's senior day for Duke. Manny Diaz earlier this week noted that Duke's been able to win 15 of their last 18 games at home. And it's a part of the reason the senior class has had such a big impact. Like, they're making Wallace Wade Stadium a much more kind of intimidating atmosphere. And they're going to need it once again, because I just mentioned our friends at FanDuel right now. They've got Virginia Tech favored by 3. So Duke a home underdog in this one against the Hokies. But this senior class has really created that home field advantage.
Yeah, they've really turned it into an advantage. it's kind of remarkable. Like the 15 wins is obviously impressive and strong. You think about the 3 losses they've had, even they were 3 games Duke should have won. The Carolina game in 22, the Notre Dame game, the 4th and 16 for Sam Hartman last year, and then the SMU game.
Man. Yeah,
I mean,
flashbacks for all of these. Tough.
Not to open up old wounds, but I mean, good Lord, they're so close to being 18-0 and unbeaten at home over the last 2-ish seasons. So it's an exciting one. I mean, it's kind of weird to be in college football and you've got 2 teams that are 3-3 in the ACC. The difference is Duke went 4-0 in the non-con. Virginia Tech was 2-2. But man, nobody's going to the playoffs here. Like nobody's competing. But Virginia Tech needs a win to get bowl eligible. Duke has some history on the line. Double-digit win seasons do not come easily at Duke, and if they win these last 2 and then win a bowl game, they're 10-3 in the first year under Manny Diaz. And think about how unlikely that would have been in your mind back in the spring when we were wondering if they were going to have an offensive line.
Right.
In fall camp when it was, well, how is the offensive line coming together? And there were so many other questions. Quarterback battle obviously played out, but it's been a really successful season. It's exceeded expectations, I think, and now it's just a matter of how much further can you exceed the expectations.
And we will see. It starts on Saturday against Virginia Tech, and then their last game of the season at Wake Forest. Again, to your point, Duke's got a chance to have 9 wins in the regular season. That's only happened twice since 1941, in 2013 and 2014. And they've only ever had one 10-win season in the history of Duke football, and it was that 2013 season. So still a lot of things to be playing for if you are Duke. Really appreciate the time, Conor. I know you got a lot of basketball and football coverage coming up. How can people get involved and support your work?
Yeah, duke.rivals.com. Devils Illustrated is where you can find me. Got a story on Patrick Ngongba that lays out a lot of what we talked about him. We'll have a preview up, football coverage. I mean, it's a busy time of year, and it's a great time to sign up at Devils Illustrated.
Great to see you today, Conor. Appreciate the time. We'll do it again soon, okay?
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Conor O'Neill joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. That wraps up our show here today. Really fun conversation about what the depth of this Duke basketball team can do moving forward. And let's honor the senior class on Saturday with a win over Virginia Tech on the football field. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.